Waasland Coast Guard, Oscar Wilde, over.
We have an incident on board. We have a confirmed fire. We require firefighting assistance.
MIRG stands for Maritime Incident Response Groups. It's a team of specialist firefighters that are trained and equipped to respond to incidents at ships. MIRG-EX is an exercise that we've conducted to explore how our MIRG teams can work together using the European Union's civil protection mechanism to support the deployment of teams. There are several elements that we had to test. There was a firefighting aspect which the Belgian and French teams took part in. There were then two other aspects. One phase was the rescue of a missing person. It was the task of the UK team to rescue the individual. The final aspect of the scenario was a hazardous materials incident, and the Dutch team dealt with that element of the incident. The complexity of the operation was added to by the fact that we had a second incident. We had a fire on another vessel, which the Belgian MIRG team had to also respond to. Now that tested the capacity and was also designed to test the coordination arrangements of dealing with two incidents in the same geographical area at the same time.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention please? This is the captain's report.
The master of the Oscar Wilde declared that he had a fire on board and requested assistance into the local Coast Guard in Belgium. They will then assess the incident and they would offer potentially MIRG teams. MIRG Belgium was then stood up and proceeded to the incident, at which point they made an assessment that they needed some additional support. That was then fed back to the Coast Guard of Belgium, who then put out a wider call to other Coast Guards to alert their MIRG teams, and those teams were then stood up and deployed to the vessel. At the same time, there was a more formal alerting line going on, where the Coast Guard in Belgium notified the national authorities, who then put a request in for assistance for additional MIRG teams through the ERCC in Brussels. The value of testing that is if we were to expand the MIRG concept over a wider geographical area, then that more formal route may come into play and be useful. The complexity of the exercise was really quite significant. It was about the coordination of a number of agencies and a number of teams across several sectors. So we were dealing with the Coast Guard, we were dealing with land-based civil protection authorities, with the ship's crew, with firefighting teams on board. There was a number of communication channels that were open at any one time. To ensure an effective incident response, it was necessary to make sure that they were really coordinated. That as with any real incident, the intention was to create a complex scenario to test those communications procedures as much as we possibly could. So the way we built the exercise was that each phase of the exercise impacted upon the other. So the teams had to come up with a common understanding of how they were going to resolve that incident. After we winch down, the next step for us is our boarding control process.
At the boarding point, two people, they are preparing a place where they can write down who is on the ship, who leaves the ship, what material those people take with them to do the firefighting. We know at every moment who is at what place on the ship.
The most important thing we do at this point is to go to the bridge, speak to the master of the vessel and often the chief engineer and gather as much information on the incident as possible. And from that we can come up with a joint plan with the master of the vessel as to how we're going to contain that fire and stabilise the situation. But when we respond to an incident, the master is always in charge of that vessel.
We have been alerted, we flew in by a helicopter, and now we are putting in place command lines, command system. Putting in place our strike team in order to contain the fire.
I think one of the real challenges that crews faced on board was just the sheer volume of information coming in. So what they had to do at a very early stage was establish a robust command structure. And that's one of the things that we train our MIRG teams to be able to process that information in an effective way and come up with a plan as a result. risks of fighting a fire at sea are that ships are often complex structures with very difficult layouts. Temperatures are often very high where the fires are located. Ship systems are often complex. We can't just go in and isolate gas, electric, because we need to make sure that the master has control of that vessel.
MIRG teams that consists of 12 people. One's a command team of 6 people and another team 6 people. That's a strike team that can be deployed in order to contain fire or hazmat incidents to prevent mass evacuation of the ship.
The advantage of bringing the ship into port to tackle the fire is that we can get any passengers and crew that are at risk off of the vessel. So if the fire were to spread, we're not putting passengers and crew at risk as we would be at sea. So the second day of the exercise was about bringing the vessel into port. So it tested the handover from the MIRG team to the land-based fire and rescue service to transfer the command of the incident. We also tested the ability of land-based civil protection authorities to evacuate casualties from the vessel. So in this case we had 100 simulated casualties that were triaged, taken off the vessel, treated for any injuries. They were then triaged again and taken to a safe location. I think firstly, the exercise as a whole went very well. We had a number of stated aims that we wanted to test and they were achieved in the end. As with all exercises, there were obviously several learning points as well, particularly at an operational level, about how our teams work together, how they interact with the ship's crew. And there were some real challenges there in terms of communications between teams and ensuring that a common plan was stuck to and delivered. What that has enabled us to do is to plan more exercises for the future, more training events, to ensure that we build on those issues, that they're resolved in case we have to respond to an incident for real.
Okay, we're going to go down through deck 4.
One of the fundamental differences in MIRG-EX was teams from different nations operating under the command of another team from another nation. On previous exercises we've explored responding together to an incident on a vessel, but really working in isolation.
The next flight is for the Netherlands.
What we did was develop a draft standard operation procedure before the exercise. And the exercise was then an opportunity to really test that standard operation procedure and figure out what the good points were and what the bad points were. And from here we can go away and refine that and come up with a finalised procedure. I think the ability to test different teams working together under a unified command structure was a really rewarding aspect to the exercise, because it was something new that we hadn't really fully explored before, and we knew that this was the culmination of many years of work developing teams from a position of having no teams in the first place to now having teams all working together, understanding the way each other worked and being comfortable working under each other's command.
One, call me.
Yes,
Okay, it's important.
Yeah.
Okay.
This exercise really was the culmination of all that work, a lot of work to try and test that, and showed that in fact it does work and it is achievable.